Have you wondered about living elsewhere after you retire? Well, we have almost daily. As you know, it is not an overnight decision. Hi, this is Gil.
And Gene.
Of Retire There, a podcast about places to consider living in during your retirement. Hey, guess what, folks? I retired!
Oh, my goodness.
This July 2021. I'm so sorry, Gene. I wish you could join me in the freedom, but you have a few more years for that pension.
I don't think you're that sorry.
I am. Can't you tell? We embarked on searching for a new place to move for our retirement. We made a trip to Winter Park, Florida in February of 2020, came home and said, maybe not for us. As we were planning for the next trip, the pandemic arrived. Gene then came up with this brilliant idea of doing a podcast to find out what others are doing. With so many baby boomers retiring, many must be relocating. So why not connect with them and pick their brains? Here's a little background about us. I'm Asian, born in Brazil, and grew up in Flatbush, Brooklyn. I'm an engineer turned attorney turned podcaster. Oh man, I'm getting dizzy.
Yes, you are.
Thanks. I recently retired from my job practicing higher education law within a university. No more students, faculty, or staff. Whoa, this is going to be great. I love the college environment, but what do I honestly love even more? Sleeping in, not setting an alarm, staying up all hours, binging crime drama, and silly romantic comedies, developing the podcast, volunteering. Okay, let me stop. More to come, people. More to come. Jane?
I'm not Asian. And as Gil mentioned, I'm not retired. I'm just plain tired.
I'm sorry.
Born and raised in Long Island, New York, a place I've always wanted to leave. We've lived in Brooklyn, New York for many years and have been thinking about our future home. I'm a law librarian working in a court who loves his job, but we're retired by the time we select our ideal location.
Don't know about that.
We've been speaking to folks from all around the country and world who have moved to their dream venues and more. So please stay tuned. And remember, if you know anyone who has moved anywhere for retirement, let us know.
Hola, ¿cómo está? Today we will learn about Andalusia, Spain, from our guests, Sabina Ostrowska and Robert Ryan. Andalusia is in the most southern region of Spain. It's a large autonomous region of hills, rivers, and farmland about 280 miles south of Madrid, the capital of Spain. It borders Portugal on the west side and the Spanish regions of Castilla-La Mancha y Extremadura in the north, with the region of Murcia in the east, and with the English territory of Gibraltar and the Mediterranean Sea in the south. Well, that's a lot of linguistics there.
Oh, yeah.
Let's move to a little background about our guests. Gene?
Sabina was born and raised in Poland. She earned an undergraduate degree from Warsaw University in Poland, a master's degree in the Netherlands from Nijmegen University, and a doctorate from Exeter University in the UK. For the majority of her career, she worked as an English teacher, or EFL, English as a Foreign Language teacher. She taught high school in Sweden and primary, secondary, and tertiary levels in the United Arab Emirates. Her last job was a senior lecturer at Khalifa University in Abu Dhabi. In 2014, she and her husband left Abu Dhabi and became self-employed. They have a small guest house in the middle of the olive groves outside Montefrio. For our audience, Montefrio is a municipality in the province of Granada, which is one of 8 provinces within Andalusia. Andalusia, by the way, has a population of 8.5 million. The couple owns a language school in a nearby town of Alcalá la Real. Sabina is also a writer and has written textbooks for Cambridge University Press and other nonfiction books. Her book, The Crinkle Crankle Wall, is the first in the series depicting the couple's adventures of trying to start a new life among the olive groves in rural Andalusia. While Sabina's main hobby is writing nonfiction, she also enjoys long walks and photographing nature. Additionally, she loves art and used to oil paint, but she doesn't have much time for that anymore.
So Robert Ryan was born in Liverpool, United Kingdom, and raised in South Africa. He attended boarding school in Bloemfontein in South Africa, and then studied linguistics at Lund University in Sweden, and has a doctorate in linguistics from Linnaeus University in Sweden. Earlier in his career, Robert worked as a university lecturer and later as an assistant professor at universities in Sweden and the United Arab Emirates. Since Abu Dhabi, like Sabina, Robert has been self-employed, working as a translator, editor, and proofreader of academic texts. In his spare time, he uses his carpentry and woodworking skills to make simple furniture. He's also been learning the piano and other musical instruments. So, Doctors Ostrovska and Ryan, welcome to Retire There. Funny, I had just retired from university life myself, but when I started there, people called me Dr. Chan. And I thought, no, that's my sister Gina. Yes, attorneys obtain doctorates, but we are not called doctors, or I'd give myself a headache. Now, is that the custom in Europe as well? We will ask in a moment. So, guys, we are grateful to have you join us all the way from Andalusia, or Montefrio, or Alcalá la Real. I think I got that. Okay. And please tell us, how did you land in Andalusia? Take it away.
Okay, well, my name's Robert. If you want to talk about the title, doctor, then I suppose it depends on the context. If I'm going to buy a loaf of bread, then I don't need to tell the person that I have a PhD. They'll put it in a plastic packet for me, and I'll be able to get on my way. But if I'm going to be standing in front of a group of people who I'm going to talk to about linguistics, then I think it's just fair on them that I tell them who I am so that they're prepared for the awesome lecture to follow. But with this children at our language school, it doesn't matter for them because we teach them English at such a basic level. So you don't need to have a PhD to do that.
Ah, interesting. But it helps because it's awesome otherwise, right?
Yeah. But I mean, look, you have it in your back pocket and you'd be prepared to use it if you need it.
I see.
Yeah, it's me here, Sabina. So I think, just to finish what Robert was talking about, where we live now, in the context in which we live now, which is, we live in the countryside, but have a language school in a very small town of 25,000 people. It's maybe for people like you who are, live in Brooklyn, it would be like time traveling, This place is very familiar, we meet the children's families, in the supermarket. The children run free on the streets, It's a very safe, very homely environment. Like if you can imagine a place where there is no fast food restaurants. We don't have fast food restaurants. Wow. The nearest one, I think, is in Granada, which is an hour's drive.
Wow.
So it's a very different community. And I think in Montefrio, which is a village a little bit closer to our house, is very similar in this respect, that it's very traditional environment. We don't have a huge supermarkets with 20 different types of cereals to choose from. We have a little shop, a butcher, a fish shop, a fishmonger, a baker, and people still kind of tend to shop in this way. Of course, there are some supermarkets for big weekly shopping, but still the kind of small businesses or small language schools like ours, where, we have maybe 100 children, we know everyone by name,
wow.
They still thrive. And I think this is what we were looking for because we spent almost a decade in Abu Dhabi, which is a very cosmopolitan place, as you know, with big businesses, big projects. But we were kind of tired of living in this kind of expat community where people come and go, and you never have a chance to commit, create a network of friends that you can rely on. You never get to actually know anyone because even the foreign workers from your nearest shops, they come and go. So we were looking for something like that, I think.
So there's more permanence here for us here in Spain in terms of establishing social networks and even business networks. And now we feel part of the community because we have the language school. You get to meet lots of parents. And you learn about them, and they learn a little bit about us as well.
But how did you pick Andalusia of all the places in Spain or anywhere in Europe
Okay, that's a good question. Because when we decided to buy property here, actually we had never visited Spain before, and neither of us could speak any Spanish. I think we liked the idea of living in the countryside, in nature. And Spain, especially Andalusia, is still kind of scarcely populated. You know, we do have big cities here, like Granada and Cordoba, but in between, it's mostly just olive hills and mountains. And if you look in Europe, there were not many options for us. We are, like Robert is English, I'm Polish, so we both, before Brexit, when we moved here, we both had this option to come back to Europe, and we wanted to be in the European Union. In European Union, you really you have some choices. You could live in Italy, you could live in France, but it was the property price that was what convinced us to come and look for property here, which is much cheaper than in those popular parts of Europe.
Yeah, you're lucky you came before Brexit. So what kind of status do you have in Spain?
I have a permanent residence in Spain that was acquired before Brexit.
Oh, that's you're lucky, yeah.
Yeah, and now because it's been so many years, after I think 5 years, you can apply for permanent residency because you've already lived legally as a resident for 5 years, you know. I'm still a member of European Union, and like Robert, I have permanent residency, yeah. But things have changed for Brits now, you know, and of course for Americans would be probably very similar now to the British citizens, wouldn't it? Because I think nowadays the British citizens are treated as a third country here.
Yeah, I mean, your American audience, people who are American might want to wish to move to Spain, would have to follow the same rules and regulations as the Brits have to now follow post-Brexit. But the other thing is, though, that Brexit aside, because I'm married to Sabina, who is Polish and is part of the European Union, that also allows me to stay here in Spain.
Ah, okay, interesting.
Because she's still part of the European Union.
Right.
No, but it's not relevant to me right now because I already have been living here for 6 years. 7 years.
Right. Yes, I remember when the notion of Brexit surfaced, and I thought, it's never going to happen. You know, we are in one of 5 boroughs here, and the island of Staten wanted to secede. And actually, some of us, now I shouldn't insult Staten Island because I go there maybe twice a month. There's a Trader Joe's and a nice shopping. So, but they did not succeed in seceding. So, but Brexit actually happened. So that was quite fascinating. And I think it's still quite developing, right?
Well, I think it's this year the consequences of Brexit are being felt by British expats in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they have not got their resident status normalized or got a visa, they need to leave now.
Wow.
They have 90 day. You can, if you come from outside the European Union, you can stay within the European Union for 2 90-day blocks each year. There's a problem now with some British people have houses in Spain. They can only come for 90 days at a time for a maximum of 180 days a year. And also, that doesn't mean that they must leave Spain and spend a week in France and then come back. No, they must leave the European Union border, the territory, and go back to the UK, or at least leave the European Union territory, Schengen area.
Wow.
Wow.
So that's a problem for some.
Yeah.
Because if you stay for more than 180 days, there's tax implications.
Oh, that's how they get you.
Well, other implication has been that their driving licenses are no longer recognized in Spain. As long as you come on a holiday, that's fine. You can use your British license. But if you want to get residence, you stay longer than 180 days. By law, you're obliged to have a Spanish driving license. So I think for American listeners, it would be also relevant that, we in the area where we live, we we know only one American expat.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Because we live in a rural area, maybe 1 hour and a half from the coast. Perhaps on the coast there would be more. There are definitely many more Americans, like in Malaga, Madrid, Barcelona, those
Sure.
kind of areas. Yeah, but here really not so many.
So you really
driving license would be, because of the rural location. There is some public transport, but you can't sit and wait for 3-4 hours for a bus to come. It's a rural location, so
okay.
There are buses, but with 3 a day from A to B. So you would have to have a driving license, which would probably mean that you, as an American, a citizen, you would have to take the test again, which is not a problem, but it's a setback, I think.
I don't like tests.
I have a question.
Driving tests.
Well, I have a question. You both seem to be language experts, which is intimidating to me. But how long did it take you to learn Spanish?
Well, we had different routes. You see, when we bought our property, we didn't speak any Spanish. Okay, so we had a lot of linguistic challenges. And then after we purchased the house, we spent 2 more years in Abu Dhabi preparing and planning, because after you buy your property here in Spain, usually it takes a few months to finish the legal procedures, and then probably usually another year or several months to a year to, if you want to do any reforms to your property, it has to be approved by the town's architect. So, you have to hire an architect. He has to draw plans. You have to approve they have to meet with your ideas. Then the town hall's architect has to approve those changes. So it took another year for all the paperwork, legal work with the property and the architect, because when we bought the property, we already knew we were going to reform it. I started, while we were in the stage of waiting for all the paperwork to finish, I started to learn Spanish, but Robert didn't. So my progress has been much faster. And we took some lessons, no?
Yeah, we took lessons in the town of Alcalá la Real with a Spanish lady who taught us Spanish, with a group of other English expats as well. So
and Belgian expats.
And Belgian, Dutch people.
Yes.
We got to, she organized it, and a bit informal lessons.
Nice.
But we made some progress.
But I think most progress you will make, because we have a guest house in winter months, even in the summer. 50% of our clients are Spanish. So we had to quickly improve our Spanish to talk about hospitality things and give them recommendations and so on. Then a few years later, we opened the school. We took over a school that was already in place. And because you have to deal with clients and you talk to people every day, you just learn on the spot,
Right.
So for me, the progress just by having to use it was the fastest.
Okay.
The classroom was fine. But
when you're in a country and you're forced to use the language, then
you don't have a choice.
You have no choice. You just learn it.
It sounds like in your area you have to learn Spanish, right?
You won't survive without it.
I must make a comment about Andalusia is, of course, one autonomous region in Spain. But if you kind of zoom in on Andalusia, there's a big difference between the coastal areas and inland cities and rural inland Andalusia. Yeah.
Oh.
You could think of them as 3 distinct areas. So the coast is very touristic. Lots of tourism. Most of the Spanish people who live on the coast speak very good English because of that tourist interaction. That's also an area where a lot of expats move to the coast because they want to be on the beach.
Right.
Life seems to be a holiday for some people. Then you have the big cities of Andalusia. So that's Sevilla, Cordoba, and Granada, Cadiz, and even Jaén. These are cities, and they have their own character, and they're busy. They're cities. There's movement and action, universities, and so on. And then you have the countryside, which is more rural, and small towns and small villages. and there the pace of life is much slower, and it's very different.
Sure.
And I would say, in a sense, more authentic. And there, the people, the Spanish people at least, they don't really speak that much English. They have no real use for it because they're not interacting with tourists.
Mm-hmm.
The young people, of course, learn English for their university studies.
But many young people where we live actually don't study at university. Most young people who live in this area don't actually go, not most, but many in the rural areas don't go to university. They work on the olive farms and help with the family farming business, because we farm olives in the winter. The harvest is in the winter. But then other times of year, we have a big asparagus production and almonds and cherries. So many young people are just busy and go directly. Maybe they study some agricultural studies just to help out. But they have, like, if a family owns a lot of land, their future is kind of
to that land.
So you had mentioned the cost being lower, which makes sense. Can you give us an idea of average cost of housing, perhaps in Montefrio or in Andalusia?
Do you mean to rent a house or to buy?
Both, if you know.
I'll start with rent, because I think for many people who want to live abroad, it can be a good option to rent a place for half a year or so to get a feel for it, to see if you actually like it. Because some things look very nice, on paper, but then you come here and you start to live there and you realize that you really hate, or maybe just that it was a fun place for holiday, but you don't want to be there anymore.
Sure.
So if you want to rent in, let's say in Montefrio or Alcalá la Real, you can get a very nice apartment, 2-bedroom apartment for €200 a month.
Wow.
For 500 and more, you can get like basically a penthouse. There are no penthouses in Montefrio, but in Alcalá you could get a very nice even for 500 you could get a little villa or little house with a roof, like a roof terrace overlooking the castle. Your money, can go far in terms of
Wow,
rent.
that's great.
Yeah. Benefit of renting is if you're not happy with the property because your neighbors are making noise. Spanish are very noisy by definition. They just speak at a very high volume. And so you may want to not like your neighbors, or there could be dogs barking next door, which is common. Just change, yes? So renting is a very good option. Whereas buying property is a bit of a risky business. I write about it in my book about kind of the adventures we had looking for property in rural Spain. And a lot of readers, who live here, a lot of my readers are expats who live here in Spain, would write back to me and said, "Oh, this is exactly what happened to us."
Oh, that's
because
nice. That's validating.
You have two types of real estate agents. You have real estate agents who cater to expats, to Brits, to Americans, Dutch, French, and their prices are so elevated. And, they often prey on nostalgia.
Wow.
We see a little ruin in the olive field and we get ideas going. And suddenly the price is €150,000, which is approximately the same in American dollars. But it's nowhere near what this property is worth,
right?
Because you may be not even allowed to change it in any way. It may be not a legal property.
Right.
It has to be knocked down completely and started over.
Wow.
So those prices, I find, personally, that's my personal opinion, but many people agree with me, is the prices that many expat agencies set for expats are extremely elevated. But in general, you can buy a little house for €150,000 easily.
Wow.
Okay. Now, I was just looking, the euro today is $1.16 in the United States. So yes, I think a home for €150,000 is quite nice, right, Jean?
It's amazing.
I mean, especially in a nice location where you have peace, fresh air, which is something we personally desire.
I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. In a few years, we'll be looking to leave Brooklyn. Bye, Brooklyn. Yes.
And can you tell us about...
I just don't want to mislead people to think that yes, for 150,000, your money, property-wise, will go far here. However, this property is not going to increase in value.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not London or New York, yes? In fact, it can even lose value.
Sure.
There are lots of also limitations, just, in terms of electricity connections. Many people need to put solar panels on their houses to get very strong electricity. A house in the countryside may not have water, so you may have to spend another 10,000 euro to dig a borehole or something. So there are a lot, even though those properties look nice, like our properties are completely in the middle of nowhere, but we've had to put a lot of money into it. Some of our friends have townhouses, like little townhouses, semi-detached townhouses in town. These are even cheaper. These can go for 60, 70, 80,000 euro. But again, there will be no parking outside because you have to imagine yourself in a medieval town, There's enough passage just for two people to go through. Also, I think they are very difficult to sell again. So I think if you're going to buy here in rural Andalusia, just buy to live. If you want to live here, just buy it. But it's not an investment. I wouldn't consider it.
Okay.
I'd like to add something there for anyone who wants to buy a house in Spain. Also employ an independent lawyer or solicitor to represent you, and not one that's recommended to you by the estate agent. That's why I say it should be an independent lawyer who's working for you. Why? Because you can see in the estate agent's windows, they'll have photographs and listings of properties, and they look lovely and a nice location in the countryside. But then when you inquire carefully, they do not have a title deed there is no title deed to the property because the property officially does not exist. Okay. So what's happened here, there's an owner. No, you have owners of land. A farm owner, he has land. Then back in the day, maybe 50 years ago or even 20 years ago, they built a house on that land, but this was not legal.
Just for family.
Just for the family house, they built a house. Now, this house has no title deed, or catastral in Spanish.
Okay.
There's no title deed. So you can buy it, but you can't really insure it. You won't get a certificate for first habitation.
Wow.
And the government can come knocking on the door, and it has happened in the past, and say, look, this house shouldn't be here.
It's illegal.
It's illegal. So you need to pay a fine.
Wow.
And even if you pay the fine, it doesn't legalize the house. They just fine you for kicks. Maybe.
Right. And they can keep fining you.
Yeah. And there were cases on the coast where lots of houses were built illegally.
That was a decade.
Yeah, that was long, 10 years ago. But they actually bulldozed them down.
Wow.
And the people lost their money. There were some Brits who lost their money. They bought the house. The developer got the money, walked away. They're the owner of the house. But the house was not legal.
Wow.
And there were actually whole little suburbs that had these problems. This has been cleared up now, but even in the countryside, you see it's a nice house, but then when you inquire, it's not registered as a house, maybe. It's just a barn.
Oh.
It looks like a house, but the papers that cover it say they call it a nave, and that's a barn.
Okay.
Okay, and you say, well, what's the problem? It looks like a house. No, because you really don't have permission to live in a barn.
Interesting.
So you need to, anyway.
But the lawyer.
You need a lawyer. If you find a house that you like, get your lawyer to inquire and read all the papers that pertain to that property to make sure that everything is legal.
So is there a equivalent to a city hall where there are property records?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Town hall has all that. But what I don't understand is it seems that the estate agency system in Spain is not regulated. Anyone can be an estate agency.
Oh, there's no licensure. Okay.
So this is my problem. So I look in the window and they say, okay, you're trying to sell this house as an estate agent, but this house is not legal. And then they say, well, that's between you and the owner. between you and the seller. You know?
Oh.
And it's like, no, you're kind of wasting my time here. So so you should just basically inquire what houses actually have title deeds.
Okay, that's really good to know. And you guys did not rent initially you just bought the property when you were in Abu Dhabi?
Yeah, we came here and we spent 6 weeks, I think, staying in different guest houses and so on, and exploring the area and searching for a house that we liked.
In the summertime.
In the summertime, during the break from the university. Yeah. And then we found the house that we liked, and we got our lawyer to inquire about that.
Okay.
Yeah, but we didn't do any planning. We are not like you seem to have invested into actually researching your future. We had an idea to come to Spain, and we just did it. We didn't do any research. Yes, we didn't rent. We didn't know any Spanish. But just sometimes, in life, you just have to. If you spend all the time planning,
sure,
you miss actually doing it.
Yeah. Absolutely,
you overthink it.
Yes, you overthink it.
We just did it.
But you were smart to hire a lawyer. And how did you find that person? Someone who you could trust? Was it recommended?
Yes, you have in every town you have expat communities. So I think I don't remember exactly, but he was recommended by another English couple.
Nice.
Who went through the same process. So in any town you will find expat communities who have been doing, and there are Facebook groups for all these communities where if you have any problem, you just like people write things like where can I have my nails done?
Yes.
Because they want an English speaking.
Sure.
Sure. Even small problems like that.
And can you tell us a little about your house, the property?
The house that we bought was a small cottage made of stone.
Nice.
Okay?
Wow.
The walls are about 70 centimeters thick, quite thick rock, stone and mortar. Yeah. But then parts of the house were not so good condition. Like there was a barn attached to the end of the house. That I demolished that and rebuilt it with thick bricks.
Nice.
So we changed the house a lot. And then, of course, during that process, we took the whole roof off the house. So the house had no roof at all.
Wow.
And then build up the walls to the side from the barn to the same height as the original house, because they were in different elevations, and then put a one roof on the whole building. So it's a unified roof. It's not a roof with different gaps and elevations.
Sure.
Well, the original roof that was made of straw and mud.
It was
wow.
Yeah. So
you are very adventurous, and clearly you had ideas of what you wanted. So you had to hire, like the people who the permits and so forth. So you must have gotten to know them quite well.
Well, they wanted a house they wouldn't get wet in.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, but that construction project of renovating the house took me a year and a half.
Oh,
wow!
Of full-time work on the house.
Wow!
When I saw it the first time, I thought maybe 6 months it will take, but it actually took a year and a half.
Oh,
wow!
And we worked fast and every day. I worked every day.
I'll bet.
And we had help, of course, with the big structural parts of the house.
Right.
We were 4 or 5 guys, putting the concrete beams in the roof.
Wow.
So they're kind of heavy things. We need a group of guys.
Mm-hmm. And you were living there as well, yes, on the site?
Yes, unfortunately.
Of course. No, a lot of people, a lot of people have to do that. It's too costly.
Yeah, or maybe in retrospect, I could have bought a small caravan.
I don't know what's worse.
And where's the guest house? Did you build that also?
The house now, as it stands, is quite a large house. So the guest houses are 2 apartments on either side of the house, but they're attached to the house.
Wow.
So there's 3 entrances to the house, 2 private entrances on either end of the house for the guests, and then our entrance is kind of in the middle of the house for us.
Okay.
And do you rent those as apartments or as sort of B&Bs?
Yeah, we do Airbnb. So we rent as like independent, we call it rural apartments, because they are self-contained.
Yeah, the guests, they come and stay with us for 1 week or for 2 weeks.
How does somebody find you if they want to rent there?
Well, they through normal sites, like Booking.com or Airbnb. I think for American guests and foreign, like we have guests now from Canada, and in the past we had guests from Australia, New Zealand, the States. They use Airbnb more. And for European guests, many come from Booking.com. I don't know if you know this website.
Yes, of
Sure,
course.
sure,
Of course.
Yeah.
And
So
it's under your names?
No,
it's under Cortijo Verruguia. Cortijo Verruguia.
Mm-hmm.
It's the name. This is the traditional name of our house.
Okay.
When we first started, we were thinking of coming up with maybe a name that people can pronounce.
Casa
But-
Amigos?
Yeah, or Buenas Vistas.
So how,
Something like that. I thought it was a bit cliche, and we wanted to keep the traditional name, because the people who were born in our house are now in their 80s, and they still come because they have barns, they have cottages around.
oh,
So I
wow.
thought it was like important also to keep the heritage,
Yes, very
and they feel
nice.
so proud, because our neighbors, they were born in that little cottage, and to see that this house didn't fall apart and fall into ruin, but has actually been renovated, and people from all over the world come to stay there. I think it makes them feel proud because they themselves are in their 80s. They don't want to. And living in the countryside is hard.
Yes.
They prefer to live in the village, where they have central heating and water, electricity, also easy access to health services.
So speaking of healthcare, talk to us about the healthcare by you. I assume you do have to go into the city, as you mentioned, some of the elderlies do. How far is that? Do you have to drive?
Our healthcare center is in Montefrio, 12 minutes from my house.
Oh,
Driving.
Oh, wow.
nice.
I have a personal doctor, a family doctor that is assigned to me by the national health system. Yeah. I go there for the regular checkups, and if I need more medical care,
Mhm.
then she will make a referral to the hospital, either in Granada, which is an hour away, or in Loja, another hospital. And it's a fully operative hospital.
Mm.
And this costs nothing.
What?
This doesn't cost us any money. The medicine, I take some medicine every day, and that costs me €1.25 a month.
Oh, my
What?
goodness.
So that's my just heart medicine, blood pressure medicine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Amlodipine.
Yeah. So this costs €1.25 a month for that medicine. So the medicine you take is subsidized, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And the visits to the doctor are for free,
What?
completely. So you don't pay a penny.
Oh,
Now, Sabina had an accident last year and broke her leg
oh.
and had to have an operation and titanium screws, the ambulance
Mm-hmm.
cost us €5.
Oh, my goodness.
Whoa!
And that was what, 2 nights in hospital?
3
Or
nights.
3
Wow.
nights in hospital?
Wow.
And the operations and food
And travel in ambulance. That's very good.
transport,
1
Yeah,
hour
yeah.
in ambulance.
transport up and down. It
Oh, my
cost us
Lord.
€5, and it was top quality care. Very
Excellent
clean hospital in Granada.
Wow.
As,
So this is Spain.
yeah,
Yeah.
as,
Everyone,
as,
yes.
as permanent residents, you qualify for the national health care?
Yeah, also because we
Yes.
are self-employed, so we pay monthly self-employment fee to the government. So if you are self-employed, it's called autonomo.
Mhm.
There is a fee you have to pay every month to the government, and that covers your health. But also, for example, we both work, so we are both self-employed. But if only I worked, my self-employment fees would also cover Robert if he chose not
Okay.
to work.
So what are these fees like? Are they really high?
The first year is, I think, €50 a month, which is very good because, if you're starting a business, you have other costs.
Right.
And then they go up to 160, and the cap is at 300.
Oh, okay.
So for €300 a month, if you are self-employed, you can provide health security to your whole family, and you can run your little business legally. And also, if you, for example, it will make it possible for you to apply for residency in Spain. Yes?
Okay.
Because you are employing yourself.
Yes.
So that 300 a month that you pay to be self-employed allows you access to the health system, but also that money also goes towards your pension.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
And then, of course, when you are self-employed, hopefully you'll have customers for whatever business that you're running, and you'll have an income from that. If you want to draw a salary from your one-man company, then you've paid the first 300 euro of tax on that salary.
Oh, it's very fair.
Well, the thing is, yes, I think so, but I just feel that the 300 is a little bit high as an initial cost per month, because you might not be making that much money every month.
Yeah.
So you might only turn over
right.
1,000 or 2,000 euro, and then you have associated costs. So in terms of the salary at the end of the month, it's not guaranteed. And salaries here in Spain are much lower than in the United States, for example, or in the rest of Europe even, or at least North and Central Europe. So an average salary can be between 1,000 and 1,500 euro.
Okay.
I think the recent
For a school
statistics
teacher,
was 1,500, more or less, in this area.
It'd be more in Madrid, of course, but then costs are higher in Madrid.
Yeah. But the good thing about the autonomous system is that if you pay into the system for 15 years, then you can retire and start drawing a little pension. Obviously, your pension will depend on how much you've put in.
Right.
But in theory, after 15 years, you can say, okay, I just want to retire. I'm happy. If you have some other savings, that's fine, because it may not be enough to completely retire. Yeah, but I think it's a good system.
But you get a state pension then, minimum state pension.
And how does that work?
Well, once you retire, if you've been self-employed and you retire, then you are eligible for the state pension.
Okay, so you don't have to work your 50 years.
So even if you're 20, you retire at 35, you can get the pension at 35.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing.
No, but it won't be much.
It won't be much. Like I said, it won't be much
35.
because it's depends how much you have put into the system.
Right. Yes.
The 15 years you can retire. It's a good way to get into the country, I think, if you're from outside European Union.
If you can start a business.
Yes.
You can't just fake it. You can't just pretend to be self-employed and pay these fees.
Do you consider where you live walkable to recreational activities? What do you do for recreation in Andalusia or where you are?
No, from our house, you can walk doing hiking trails directly from the house. There's hiking in the mountains. We're in the mountains. But to go to a tennis court or swimming
municipal swimming,
swimming pool,
coffee
then you
shop.
need to drive.
Okay. All right. So you need to have a car, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
If you decide to live in the countryside, it's 100% you need a car. If you live in a town like Alcalá, La Real, but if you live in a town, then you can take the bus, but it's not so frequent. It's maybe 3 times a day.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
So you have to really plan that.
Yeah, there are not many cultural activities around here anyway. We have some fiestas. It's a very religious country, as you know, Spain, with Catholics running around. And so we have religious fiestas, if you're into that. We have a lot of social events, but they are not high culture. So we have concerts, but they will be high school kids who go to conservatory, It's philharmonic or anything. Or, local kids do a flamenco performance, Just kind of very local things where you will know. Usually who is someone who is performing or their family, So we don't have theater. There's no cinema here. The nearest one is in Granada.
But you have cable, yes?
We have Netflix. We have satellite internet. We don't have cable because would
Right.
be impossible to connect.
Yeah. So
Okay,
that's
satellite.
another thing.
Yeah.
Our house is a bit isolated, so I have to pay for a satellite internet connection.
Mm.
So I have
And-
a satellite dish on the house looking up to the sky, and that costs me €100 a month.
Wow.
Wow.
But
So it's a bit
because,
expensive, but I need to have internet for our
Yes,
business.
yes.
Sure,
Yes.
sure. What about if you wanted to get a cup of cappuccino or espresso? You have to drive from where you are. Otherwise, you make it yourself, of course.
yes, if you want to go out, normally in Spain, people go out at 10 o'clock to have coffee and a tostada.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, we would have to drive. Yeah.
Mhm.
But so would most people around here. I
Right, and
think
it's only a short drive. Yes.
10 minutes, yes.
Oh, okay,
But
okay.
you talk about 10 o'clock. That's the second breakfast, right? What they call a second breakfast?
Yes, people would have a little snack in the morning, but if you walk outside in the town or the village at 10 o'clock, between 10, 10:30, people have their breakfast. They call it that breakfast, and that it's normally a toast with olive oil and tomato and a small coffee. And you will be actually surprised if you went out here and start asking people for cappuccino or latte. They may not know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
okay.
I shouldn't have said
Because
that.
you just
Okay.
have cafe solo or cafe con leche. Yes, you have to
Okay.
option.
Café con leche.
And-
Yeah.
And I know in the cities in Spain, they still have siesta. Do they have siesta where you are or not?
Well, yes, but people, I think, misunderstand it sometimes. People think that it's like at 2 o'clock, everyone goes to bed. It's not the life here is different because normally children finish school around 2 o'clock. So it's run by basically by, I think, it's dedicated by kids because kids come home at 2 o'clock. They eat the big meal, lunch, yes, which is the biggest meal of the day, which is a proper meal, 3-course meal with salad, some fried fish or something. Then people kind of have a rest, So this is what you call siesta, but it's time to have a meet up with your family, eat a proper meal, have a cup of coffee, maybe snooze for half an hour or so. And then at 5 o'clock, we all come back to work and work until 8:30 or 9.
Wow.
So that's why you see, if you are in the UK or some other places in Europe, at 6 o'clock, all the shops are closed and there's nothing to do.
Right.
But here, actually, yes, we have time during the day where all the shops are closed and businesses are closed, but it's dedicated for the family time and to have a little break. And then in the afternoon, you can continue with your business and everything as if we would be until late hours of the night,
So your typical work day, right, could start whenever, since you have your own business, when your clients come in, and then you do break for that afternoon for the proper meal and all that, and then you return to work, you said, at 5?
Yeah, well, yes, that would be. Yes, you go to work from 5 to 8. The shops the businesses are normally open.
Oh, what about your school?
Because we run a school, it's a language school where kids come to study English after school. So our day is a little bit different. So we would eat like a bigger meal around 2 o'clock. Then we would go to work at 3 and work until 9.
3 until 9 p.m.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then you eat again after that, yes?
But something small, yes. Normally in Spain, after 8 o'clock, we eat small things, like a tapas, some small sandwiches or a pizza, maybe some pizza,
So that must have been quite the culture shock from Abu Dhabi, yes?
No, because in the Arab world, things slow down in the afternoon. But then there's a lot of nightlife. People are on the streets from
people go out
8 till
o'clock.
12 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the morning. There's activity in Abu Dhabi and Dubai to avoid the heat of the daytime.
Yeah, I think because of the weather, the same maybe the daily lifestyle is very similar in that respect. That also in Abu Dhabi, people kind of tend to go in during the day, then go out again after 5 or 7 o'clock when you actually can do something
without bursting into flames.
Yeah, and here also in Spain, you remember that months from June until September, it's extremely hot during the day. From 12 o'clock until 4, you want to stay inside.
So do you guys have air conditioning?
No.
Wow.
Because our house is built of stone and the walls are very thick.
So it's cool.
Inside.
Nice.
Plus, our house is over 1,000 meters altitude.
Oh.
So it can be very hot in the day, of course, but inside the house is cool. And then even at night in the summer, our house cools down because we're at such a high altitude. But for example, Granada and Sevilla, those cities are at a lower altitude. So in the summer, it's still very hot at night.
Okay.
At night, it stays hot. It can be 35 degrees in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
So
I think, but also many of the medieval cities. Last summer, we visited Salamanca, which is similar to the other medieval cities. They are all made of stone. It feels like the sun is absorbing, the stone is absorbing all the heat of the day, and they never cool down, It's very different, whereas in countryside, there's a lot of breeze, fresh air. It's much cooler. But in town, like at the school, we have air conditioning for the students, of course, because it doesn't, the insulation is much different here in the buildings. In the city.
I'm sure. And you would lose your customers if they had to study in such dire straits.
And how's the weather in the winter, though?
Yes, it can be because of the altitude, like Robert said, the temperatures differ. Like right now, it's 16th of October. It's 25, 26 degrees outside. So it's quite sunny. And
it's, Celsius.
Celsius.
The same in January, it can be 20 degrees during the day. But at night, the temperature goes right to 0 or even below 0. So we have extreme changes in one day,
Okay.
And we're talking centigrades, yes?
Yes, of course. In terms of food shopping and eating, where do you food shop? Do you go right into the city, as you mentioned? Or I suppose people also grow a lot of vegetables if you're in the rural areas, right, and all that?
Yes, I think in the countryside where we are, all our neighbors grow vegetables like cucumbers, beans, tomatoes, peppers, and so on, the staple. But because we don't have farm animals, so we go to we have 2 supermarkets in Alcalá and another 2 other supermarkets in Montefrio, where you can buy really pretty much anything you want. Fresh fish from the Mediterranean, because it's very close. It's very good quality of produce, very good quality of meat, anything you want. And also there are some things that English people like baked beans, So,
Robert, did I hear you mention that you were a vegan?
I am not a vegan. So we got around to that. No. It's not that popular. Veganism
vegetarianism
is not that popular in Spain.
Wow.
It's more traditional meat.
Okay.
We have traditional jamón, which is cured pork meat, thinly sliced. It's very delicious. It's
sounds like bacon. Sounds like bacon.
Yeah, but
it's cured.
It's cured, and you it's not cooked at all.
Oh,
so they can hang it. It's the leg of the back leg. It can hang for 18 months or even 2 years.
Wow.
In a cool house. And it gets wiped down with vinegar so it doesn't go off. Wow. And it's protected from the flies and it's kept cool. And the meat, it cures on its own. Yeah.
Interesting.
Salted, no?
Yeah, they put some salt on the outside. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds tasty.
Yeah, it's a staple food here, but it's very expensive in New York. You can you have jamón ibérica, which is the meat from the pig that's been eating acorns in the forest.
Oh my goodness!
Acorns under the oak tree, right? So if they eat those acorns, then it's the best quality. That can be expensive. It can be $5,000 for a kilogram or something. Crazy prices.
Wow!
But here in Spain, it's
staple.
It's everyday food. Yeah.
So you have to have a big freezer.
Oh no,
No, you don't freeze it. It's cured. You just put it in the fridge. It's fine.
Oh, okay.
You can look online. They have a special device, which is like a cutting board with a slicer. And at big family festivals, like during Christmas or for Easter, the family would buy this big leg of lamb and keep on slicing it for several days and eating it as tapas. But food in general, like if you want to go out with friends, I'd say it's cheap, very affordable. But the reason I think we were talking about it with Robert before we came here is we don't have fancy restaurants that cater to tourists. All the restaurants have to be open all year round. And, the local Spanish people here do go out with their families and friends all the time. So the prices are very affordable. Like you can get, in Spain, it's popular for lunch to have menú del día, which is a set menu del día, which is a set menu of 3 courses for €10 or even 8 to 10 euro.
Wow, nice.
And it includes 1 drink. That's a bargain,
Wow, yes.
If you want to, in the evening, if you want to eat a la carte, you can easily spend 15, 20 euro with drinks. A glass of wine is €2.
Wow.
A small beer is €2. In this rural area, like I said,
Right. That's very nice.
It's very good, yeah.
Yes.
And
Okay.
even in the rural area, can you get good fish?
Yeah, we get very good in this local supermarket that we use, Mercadona. They have a very good fish station, very good fishmonger. And also the pescadoras here around here, yes, the fishmongers. Because it's not too far. It's 1.5 hours from the coast.
Mhm.
So we have very good cod, bacalao, we eat it all the time, and very mussels, shrimp, all sorts of octopus, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's a big staple also in the Asian culture.
Yeah, the fish is all the seafood and fish is very popular here.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. What about when you leave? How far is the airport from you?
Yes, good question.
We have 2 airports. We have Granada Airport, which is 1 hour from our house. But Granada Airport doesn't have mostly flies within Spain. So you can fly to Tenerife, Madrid, all around Spain. Or if you want to fly to Europe, you can go to Malaga Airport, which is 1.5 hour drive. And from Malaga, you fly to UK, all the European cities. But if you want to fly to States, you'd have to fly to Madrid and then to States.
Okay.
I think Madrid is 4 hours drive.
Okay. Would you consider where you are elder friendly? Because that is one of the focus of our shows.
Yes, it is very friendly to old age pensioners. Because the Spanish people value the family structure.
Right.
So your grandfather and your grandmother are always looked after by the family as much as they can. But as I said, the health system in Spain is fantastic. The national health system,
Diagnostics.
And they really respect the elderly. They're looked after. And of course, the diet, the Mediterranean diet,
Yes.
is healthy compared to some other foods that you might have.
And I think it's a very friendly, like if you walk around town, you see a lot of places in the park and the areas where pensioners are gathering,
Yes.
Every town has several old age homes,
Every town has a center for old age pensioners, which they can visit from their house. So they might live in the same town. They can walk over to a center and speak with each other and play games, boule, and sit inside and read. And then they have nurses on staff who go and walk with them through the town and check that they've taken their medicine and so on and so on.
Wow. And that's all free.
Yes, of course.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay. Is there anything you would like to add? I know we've kept you for quite some time. Any advice for people who would like to retire in Andalusia?
My advice for anyone who would like to retire in Andalusia is, yes, it's possible, but you need to have reasonable expectations from a lifestyle that's based on the countryside. You're not going to be in some dynamic city. Things are, I would say, much slower paced here. You have rural areas in the United States as well. I'm sure it's a slower
Yes,
pace.
of course.
Brooklyn.
Yes.
Having said that, I think it's a lovely place to be. It's a quiet, peaceful area. There's good security here. We don't feel threatened. When you move around the world, you look at different countries, and you come to Spain, for example, you can appreciate the peace that we enjoy here. There's so many other places in the world that are full of turmoil, and strife.
Yes.
And it's very sad, of course. But when you look at your own life in Spain, I think we were very lucky. We're very lucky.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
In
that's
fact,
wonderful.
our whole conversation has been so peaceful. I noticed that my anxiety level has gone down.
Yes, you're very calm during this
I know.
conversation.
I
Joe.
know. It's these two beautiful people. I feel very comfortable.
But I have one question for Robert. Now, you live in the countryside. Do you miss the comedy shops? Because it seems like you're the type of guy who wants to go up on stage and do an act.
That's what I do in class when I'm teaching.
I was just going to say that. Yes.
I have a captive audience.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
Oh, I
and they
forgot
don't.
about
They don't.
that.
Yes.
That's why you do this.
Yes. Well, in his school as well as his university life, professors always have the hold of the class, right?
Yeah, and they're counting on their grades, so that
Yeah. Oh,
they're
absolutely.
going to laugh at every joke.
Mhm,
They have to. I mean, I'm the guy who writes the exam. I'm the guy who marks the exam. I'm the guy who sets the grade. What's not to like?
You got it. Okay. All right. And on that note, I think we're good. Yes, Gene?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you guys so much. This was lovely. And I learned so much. We had interviewed a couple in Sevilla, and the life there is different. But they also are Americans and spend, I think, half the year
In California.
in California. You can certainly tell by the pace. And I think in a rural setting, it must be just so nice. You wake up and you hear the birds. Or maybe, I know your house is so thick with the rocks.
To open the window.
Oh,
You open the windows, of course.
And
So
you
you
probably
hear
know,
it.
you probably know everybody in town, right?
Yeah, they know all the students,
that-
families.
that's-
Everybody, but we know lots of people.
Yeah,
That's good and bad, because if you ever do anything bad, everybody's going to talk about
yeah.
it.
Everyone, it's going to all go on TikTok. All TikTok. Okay.
There's only one thing that's worse than being talked about.
What's
Not
that?
being talked about. That's Oscar Wilde, obviously.
Okay. All right. Well, that's very good to know, because we were just going to give you credit. So you're not going to get that credit today.
No,
Okay.
uh,
Senor Ryan. Is it Rian or Ryan?
Ryan.
No. How do you pronounce that in Spanish? Is it Ryan?
Look, my name is Robert Carl Ryan.
Oh, excuse me.
So this translates to Roberto Carlos.
Roberto Carlos Ryan.
And then
Okay.
the kids love it because there's a famous singer, a Spanish singer called Roberto Carlos.
Oh,
Ah.
This famous, it's like Justin Timberlake or something like that.
I don't know how famous.
Justin Believer.
Believer. Okay, I can go on all day. So, all right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
It
you.
was
This
nice
is
to
great.
meet you.
Really
Thank you
nice.
so much.
Really nice. And we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Okay.
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 Well,
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you know someone who's relocated for retirement and wishes to share their story with us, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Our email address is gg@retirethere.com. Our website is retirethere.com, and you may follow us on Twitter @retirethere_. Now, if you've liked our show, please subscribe and rate it in Apple Podcasts. In the meantime, be well.